Most corporations, whether it's for-profit or non-profit, are run by a board of directors elected by the shareholders or members. In for-profit companies, the board members are often businessmen and women knowledgeable in the methods of managing large corporations. Being a board member for a company is considered a prestigious and important position. The board is ultimately responsible for whether or not the company succeeds or fails, and that can have a major impact on the investment of the shareholders. If you've been elected to the board of your community association, the responsibilities will be similar to your counterpart on the board of General Motors. The welfare of the organization is in your hands. Often, owners who are elected to association boards think their job is to periodically check on the day-to-day administration and deal with rules violations. But in reality, the board is legally held responsible for everything related to that association. As a nonprofit organization, corporate and state laws place certain specific legal responsibilities on your shoulders. The fact that you are an unpaid volunteer does not excuse you from your responsibilities. Even more daunting is the fact that the corporation is involved with people on a very personal level. Your decisions can have a major impact on what is probably their largest asset, their home. The things you do may even affect their personal lives, whether or not they can have pets or what type, how much noise they can make, even inside their own homes, what they can and cannot do right outside their own doors. These are all areas that you may be called on to become involved with. And if that's not enough, because the oversight of the association involves physical property, financing, and laws, it may look like you have to become an instant engineer, architect, accountant, lawyer, manager, social worker, mediator, insurance agent, and the list could go on and on. It's not as bad as it sounds, but it does mean that you have to take this job seriously and gain a good understanding of just what it is you are really responsible for when you accepted the position as a board member of your association. This tape was created to help you out and make your term as a board member a successful one. As a board member, your primary responsibility is usually laid out in the association governing documents. That responsibility is essential to preserve, protect, maintain, and enhance the value of the asset. This may be stated in somewhat different terms, such as maintenance, management, operation, and administration of the common areas. But essentially, it comes down to simply taking care of the physical areas as they're described in your documents. The common areas may include grounds, buildings, roads, recreational facilities, or even portions of the units themselves. The documents will describe these, and you really need to have a clear understanding of what they cover. Let's take a better look at what we mean when we say preserve, protect, maintain, and enhance the value of the asset. The tangible portion is the dollar value of the asset, the physical property owned by the association or by the members in common. This can be appraised, measured, calculated, and compared from year to year. You can determine if the value is going up or down and by how much. This will give you an overall indicator of whether or not the board is doing their job. How well will depend on the value relative to the marketplace. Is the value of your association going faster than similar communities nearby? Slower, at the same pace? Simple inflation and market forces will generally increase the value of the property. A well-run association will do better than that. Keep track of how your association is doing. It's a measure of your job performance. Do you understand just what physical assets the association is responsible for? They will be spelled out in your governing documents. If your board hasn't already done this, you might want to take a physical inventory of these assets so that you have a better understanding of just what's involved. Start with the description of the common areas in the documents and list them out. These are usually stated in fairly general terms and often have drawings accompanying them. For example, they might say that the association is responsible for the common roads, sidewalks, grounds, and buildings as described in the site plans. The site plans would show these areas. This will give you an overview. Then you'll want to break them down into as much detail as you can about each of the areas and their components. If you're in a condominium type association, the list would be expanded to include those portions of the units themselves that the association is responsible for. This list will accomplish a number of positive purposes. First, it'll give everyone, board member or owner, a better understanding of what the association is responsible for and what the owner is responsible for. Second, you may find some areas where responsibility is not clearly defined in the documents. This could lead to serious misunderstandings between owners and the association in the future, and finding them early will give you the opportunity to clear this up. Talk to your association's legal counsel about how to get this accomplished. And third, you now have the basic component in creating a good capital repair and replacement reserve plan. You will know what areas to include in the plan. You now should have a picture of just what you as a board member have been elected to take care of. However, board members often confuse their primary responsibility with other issues. Let's take a look at how that might happen.
All right. The next item on the agenda is consideration of the budget for next fiscal year. Now, Kathy, as the treasurer, you've been working on this with your finance committee, and everyone here has had a chance to see their report. So could you give us a short summary?
Sure. Well, most of the finance committee felt, because we had a large increase in the assessment last year, that we should keep this year's budget at about the same figure, or at least keep the increase to the cost of living index. Also, they're afraid that if our assessment gets any higher, they might have a problem with the resale of our homes, since our current assessment is already higher than Maple Tree Manor Association down the street. Some of the owners whose units are on the market have mentioned that their real estate agents are getting some negative feedback on that score. Now, I think we can do this, but we may have to push back the building painting we have scheduled to do this year. If that comes out of the budget, and we keep funding of reserves at a straight 10% of the budget, we can probably keep the overall increase to 2 or 3%.
I think we've got to go even further than that. Our assessments are already too high. We need to roll them back some. I'm retired and on fixed income, and so are many of the residents here. I can't afford these yearly increases. Let's try to cut that reserve figure down a little bit. Most of us will be gone before we need it. And we've already got $50,000. I think we ought to try for a $10 a month rollback.
Wait a minute. There is paint peeling off of my building. I say we cut money out of another part of the budget. That painting's got to be done, and it's got to be done now.
If the assessments go up any more, I'm going to have to move. I won't vote for any increase, and that is final.
All right, settle down. I think we'll be done.
Sound familiar? There were 3 issues running through that discussion. First, the level of an assessment increase. Second, painting the buildings. And third, comparing the association fee to another association. One of those items dealt with the area that this board of directors is primarily responsible for: painting the building, maintaining the asset. The board is responsible for the maintenance, repair, and replacement of common areas, in this case, the exterior of the building. If you look at your documents, I doubt you'll find any reference to a board's responsibility to keep assessment low or even comparatively low relative to other associations. This is a typical misunderstanding, confusing legal responsibilities with political or personal wishes. The board is responsible for the maintenance of the common areas, in this case, painting. If the building needs repair, the board must see to the repair, even if it means increasing the fees in order to accomplish this. One of the board members commented on the level of their assessments compared to another association. Very often owners will raise this issue when faced with a budget increase. Short of comparing both associations' governing documents and budgets line by line, there is no way of comparing them fairly. It is apples to oranges. Boards should avoid getting caught in this no-win discussion by pointing out this fact to the person raising the issue. Let's see what should have happened.
All right. The next item on the agenda is consideration of the budget for the next fiscal year. Kathy, as the treasurer, you've been working on this with your finance committee, and everyone here has had a chance to see their report. So could you give us a short summary?
Sure. You've got a copy of our report with your board package. Most of our contract costs went up again this year. If we go ahead with the maintenance plan for this year, we're looking at a $14,000 budget increase, or about 5.5%.
Are there any areas in the budget that we can postpone for a year so that we can lower the budget?
No, not without postponing necessary maintenance.
I don't see any areas where we can cut. We all have to pay these fees. I move that we adopt a budget.
Okay.
The board's responsibility is to maintain the common areas, and although cost is a factor, it should not be the determining factor. There is another area to consider in your responsibilities. Remember, the first area has to do with the physical asset, something real. The other area is more of an intangible. It has to do with the quality of life or the perceived value of the association. The problem with trying to pin this down is that it reflects emotions and also that it changes constantly. An owner who is happy with the association moves out, and a new owner moves in who has higher and more demanding expectations of what the association should be doing. Where you once had a happy owner, you now have one that is dissatisfied. As a board member, you'll want to keep your finger on the pulse of your association. There are numerous indicators you can look at. Attendance at meetings or social events, is it up or down? Are units staying on the market longer or shorter than comparable nearby homes? When you meet other owners, are they generally upbeat about living in the association, or are you hearing a constant litany of complaints? To get a handle on this, you need to talk to people constantly. First, talk to the owners, but also talk to people from outside the community. Realtors are a good source of information on how your association is perceived. You may find that potential buyers are seeing things that you're missing. Painting the buildings has to be done because you are required to maintain the common areas. But how well that painting is done and how much money you spend doing it affects the perceived value. You were elected to make decisions that should reflect the community's expectations. Do the owners expect an extremely high level of service, or are they content with a lesser level? Do the grounds have to be manicured, or can the maintenance be stretched out a little? Balancing the wishes of the owners with their willingness to pay for those wishes is a constant concern of the board. The only way to deal with it is through good two-way communication. You need to find out from the owners what they expect, and you need to communicate back to them how you have decided to meet those expectations. We've talked about what you're responsible for. Let's take a look at that responsibility itself.
Yeah. All right. The next item up on the agenda is consideration of the lawn contract. Now, John's brother-in-law has a company, and he called me with a pretty good quote last night. Here's how it looks from what I wrote down. You can see it's about $1,000 less than what we paid last year. And John tells me that this guy's been doing this for years. He's going to do a good job. So, can I get a motion to accept this quote?
Well, I move to accept the bid of Fly-By-Night Landscaping for the lawn contract this year.
I second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Who knows? The contractor may even do a good job, but that's not the point. No bids, no references, no checking out the company, nothing in writing, no time for the board to review the proposal, and it's with a relative of a board member. This board may have a serious problem. A board of directors of a community association has a fiduciary duty to the association. The members who have elected you have placed in you their trust to run the business of the association and manage their funds properly. Basically, this means you owe the association your undivided loyalty and honesty, and establishes the rules of conduct that you need to follow. You need to act with good faith and deal fairly with all parties. You'll make a good faith effort to work for the association's benefit and not use your position as a board member to benefit yourself. Let's see what should have happened.
All right, the next item on the agenda is consideration of the lawn contract. Now, you've had a chance to review the bids from all the companies. John, I know your brother-in-law submitted a bid. I don't think we should consider it. Even though you've disclosed the relationship, you're not benefiting from it. I think the association should not give even the appearance of self-dealing. Let's just keep it at arm's length, okay?
I move to accept the bid from Premier Landscaping Company in the amount of $22,000.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
One of the rules you need to be aware of would be the business judgment rule. Simply stated, you as a board member need to make your decisions and act with the same level of care and skill as an ordinarily prudent director would in a similar business. This means you need to be informed about the business of the association. Read the information you're given prior to making a decision. Make sure you attend the board meetings. If you miss a meeting, make sure the minutes show the reason. If you vote against a proposal that is adopted, make sure your dissent is recorded in the minutes. You need to understand the governing documents. The board of directors is responsible for governing the association and cannot delegate that responsibility. They can, however, delegate the authority to act.
All right. Now, we've looked at the landscaping bids, and there's two pretty good ones. Let's ask the management company to negotiate with them and see if they can get one of them to give us a better deal. Then they can sign the contract with whichever one's the best. How's that?
Sounds good to me. I don't have the time to check them out.
Sound good?
Even if the management company is an agent of the association, they should not be put in a position of signing for the association on something the board has not formally adopted by vote. The board is also responsible for overseeing those to whom they give their authority to act. Hiring a management company does not relieve the board of their responsibility to see that management is doing what it is supposed to be doing. Let's take a look at another problem.
I see that Larry stuck a 20-foot flagpole out in front of his unit. Now, I know it's in violation of the deed restrictions, but I'm not going to be the one to tell him to haul down the American flag. I can just see us on the evening news.
Nope, not going to solve that one for you. But this points out how conflict between your responsibility and emotional issues can cause problems. As a board member, you have a duty to act, to enforce the provisions of the deed restrictions. But sometimes the enforcement isn't easy. Does that mean you can choose not to do something?
I see that Larry stuck a 20-foot flagpole out in front of his unit. I know it's in violation of the deed restrictions, but I'm not going to be the one to tell him to haul down the American flag. I can just see us on the evening news.
Well, we have to do something about it. Our restrictions prohibit that sort of thing.
You're right. If we ignore it, someone could put up some other type of flag. I think we better get our attorney involved with this one right away. It's going to be touchy, and we want to make sure that we handle it right. I think we got to get in touch with our attorney right away so he can give us our options before we take any action.
At the beginning of this tape, we made reference to the fact that you might feel as if you have to become an instant expert in a variety of areas in order to be an effective board member. This really isn't true, but you can't pretend to have an expertise in an area if you don't. When you do not have good or adequate information needed to make a sound decision about something, then it's time to call in the outside experts. Often associations are reluctant to do this because of the cost involved. However, once you have a better understanding of the duty of a fiduciary and the business judgment rule, you'll clearly see that it is your best interest, as well as the association's, to call on these people when needed. Remember, your job is not necessarily to reduce costs, but to spend the money wisely. Using the council of attorneys, engineers, accountants, or managers when the situation calls for it is a proper use of association funds. I like to call it the zero-risk principle of community association. You should take exactly the amount of risk you are paid to take. Zero, nada, none at all. When in doubt, find out. Again, simply stated, you as a board member need to make your decisions and act with the same level of care and skill as an ordinarily prudent director in a similar business. These explanations do not do the subject justice, and we strongly urge you to get a much better understanding of these areas. Although you're going to see a disclaimer at the end of this tape, I want to emphasize this point here and now. This tape can only give you general information about your legal responsibilities as a board member. You need the advice of your counsel to deal with your specific governing documents and your state law. You should invite your association's attorney to attend the first board meeting after new members have been elected to review the subjects of fiduciary and business judgment in more detail. New board members must understand these extremely important legal concepts, and continuing board members could always stand to be reminded. Take your set of the association's documents and read them through carefully. Have 2 different color highlight pens with you. Every time you see the words must, will, shall, or demand words, highlight them in one color. This emphasizes the things a board must do. Every time you see the words may, can, or should, highlight them in a different color. These are decision words that the board needs to look at to decide whether they need a policy to clarify them. The association board governs the association and usually has the responsibility to adopt rules and regulations about the use of the common areas.
We've gotten some complaints about the people in Unit 20. Their kids have been rollerblading all over the place and almost ran down Mrs. Simpson last week. I think we need a new rule prohibiting rollerblading on our sidewalks.
I agree. Those kids are obnoxious. I move that we adopt a rule prohibiting rollerblading on the common areas.
Second?
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The governing documents usually give the board the right to adopt reasonable rules and regulations. The key word here is reasonable. When adopting rules and regulations, you need to pay close attention to the process. Is there a real need for this rule, or is it covered somewhere already in the documents? Is there a real problem, or is it just something that was caused by a single incident? How can the rule be adopted? By board vote or membership vote? Can the rule be enforced? Will the rule be enforced? Can the rule be written so that it contains specific detail standards? Was there an opportunity for the members to review and comment on the proposed rules? Will there be any problems with the issues of the due process and equal protection principles? Do you have a written opinion from your association legal counsel as to the need for and language of this rule?
Well, we've gotten some complaints about the people in Unit 20. Their kids have been rollerblading all over the place and almost ran down Mrs. Simpson last week. I couldn't find anything in the documents prohibiting it, since ours were written before rollerblading became popular. If it's all right with the board, I think we should have a talk with them and see if they can tone it down some and be a little more cautious. Now, if it continues, we'll need to talk to council about whether it's covered under our documents or if we need a new rule.
The main job of the board is to make decisions regarding the association's operations. Let's take a closer look at the individual roles and responsibilities and how you go about making those decisions. A board of directors comprising the officers and the directors at large is usually elected from among the owners, or in some cases, as in developer-controlled associations, some may be appointed. Within the board, officers are elected to perform specific duties. Here, once again, you need to carefully review your governing documents to determine what those are. Generally, the president and vice president are required to be members of the board. Sometimes the secretary and/or treasurer do not have to be board members. This is our board meeting. Let me introduce you to our president, Tony.
Thanks, Janet. As the president, I serve as the chairman of the board and chief executive officer of the corporation. My main responsibility is to lead. But in order to lead, the president must have a clear picture of where the association is going. And the only way to do this is to have long and short-term goals and objectives developed. The goals and objectives should be written out and agreed on by the board. If your association does not have written goals, that may be one of the first tasks that you undertake. Defining these items will go a long way in bringing structure to the board's operations and will also provide a backbone of continuity for future boards. I provide leadership in a variety of other ways too. The president is a spokesperson for the community, both to the members and to the outside world, representing your association both physically and audibly. I represent the association in all matters. Most importantly, I control the meetings, both board meetings and association meetings. Here's where the president can have the most impact on how effectively the board meets its responsibilities. Running meetings starts with the agenda, which I prepare. The agenda spells out what business is to be conducted at the meeting and limits it to those items. Most association agendas can be reduced to no more than 8 main items. The agenda should include call to order, secretary's report, treasurer's report, management or president's report, committee reports, old business, new business, and adjournment. The agenda should be in all board members' hands no later than 3 days prior to the meeting in order to afford them an opportunity to review the items on which they'll be making decisions. All relevant information, correspondence, reports, minutes, financial statements, etc., should be attached to the agenda for study before the meeting. Now, the president needs to emphasize to each member of the board the need to come to a meeting prepared to make decisions. If a board member continually shows up unprepared, it's the responsibility of the president to take that person aside and request that they either get with the program or consider resigning. You see, it's just not worth wasting the valuable and donated time of volunteer board members as a result of one individual's failure to take the job seriously. All right. Now, Bridget is our vice president. And much like the vice president of the United States, her role is to stand in for me when I'm absent. And that's basically it. The president may choose to assign other duties to the VP, or your documents may also provide for additional duties, but basically, they need to be ready to take over in case the president is away. Now, because of that, the president and vice president should try to develop a close working relationship so that if the VP has to stand in, the association's business continues without interruption. And right now, she's also the liaison with the Reserve Planning Committee. Now, John is our secretary. Under our bylaws, a secretary does not have to be an elected member of the board. The secretary maintains the official records of the corporation, and his or her report consists of the minutes of the last meeting and references to any other correspondence received. The secretary does not necessarily have to take the minutes, but once approved at the board meeting and signed by the secretary, the minutes are official. Now, it is the secretary's responsibility to make sure the minutes are accurate. Make sure your minutes have been signed by the secretary. All board members need to read the minutes carefully. Pay close attention to the recording of votes. If you voted no to something that passed, make sure the minutes reflect your dissent. Once approved and signed, it may be too late. Now, this is Kathy, our treasurer, and her report should be a short summary of the financial situation of the association. It should not be a line-by-line review of the financial statement. Certain exceptions or variances from the budget should be noted, and any unusual expenses or other items should also briefly be noted. The treasurer is the chief financial officer of the corporation and is responsible for keeping track of the finances and funds of the association and for reporting their status to the board. The treasurer usually oversees the preparation of the budget and may administer the placement of association funds or even sign checks if authorized to do so. But it is the oversight responsibility that is this position's primary task. Because the treasurer is held responsible for the association's finances, make sure the person in this position clearly understands the financial reporting process and legal requirements. If no one elected to the board understands this, then check to see if your documents allow for this person to be appointed. You should not be the treasurer if you do not understand the financial procedures of your association. having a management company handle the finances and prepare the reports does not relieve you of your need to understand and oversee the process. Now, this one's critical. Funds have been stolen from the associations because the treasurer did not take the oversight responsibility of the job seriously enough. The management or president's report should be an overview of operational or administrative items undertaken the prior month. Again, since the formal report is written and attached, a summary at the meeting is sufficient. Any committee reports should be similarly summarized. Unfinished business should be those items that need a decision made. Since the information regarding them is attached or was attached to a prior meeting's agenda, there should be very little discussion, basically a motion, second, and vote. If the discussion's dragging out and it appears that no decision is forthcoming at that meeting, the president should consider having the motion tabled and move on to the next item. New business should consist only of those items for which there are written requests or attachments to the agenda package. If it's not in writing, it's not business. Emergencies should be the only exceptions. Again, if the president sees that it is not going to be decided at that meeting, carry it over. Motion to adjourn. If you look back at the time this type of meeting should really take, you're looking at about 30 minutes. Most meetings last longer because the reports aren't written or the board members don't review the package in advance and the president allows extraneous discussions rather than moving the meeting along. With the at-large board members, I usually assign them as liaisons to committees. Now, if your association is small or has few committees, then maybe each board member can take on a specific responsibility. Sort of your resident expert in areas such as insurance, grounds maintenance, reserve planning, and so on. This also helps in making sure that outside contractors and advisors are talking to the same person and directions don't get confused with too many players involved.
It is important that the board try to work together as a team and present a united, positive front to the owners. If you dissent on a vote, but it still passes, it doesn't do the association any good if you run around bad-mouthing the decision. Associations are mini democracies, and the majority vote will decide issues.
We have a motion and second to accept the quote from Beautiful Lawns Landscaping. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No.
Okay. All right, the ayes have it, motion carries.
Let the minutes reflect that I voted no.
All right, so noted. And also let the record also reflect that John abstained because of his relationship with one of the bidders.
The board is elected to make decisions. The only time you should abstain from a vote is if you have a conflict of interest. If you have abstained because you are not prepared to vote, having not read the information, then you are not doing the job you were elected to do.
The president appoints the chairpersons of committees. Committees serve many purposes, not the least of which is to identify and train new board members. Even small associations should have committees for this purpose. There are two types of committees, standing and ad hoc. A standing committee works year-round and usually has a broad charter. For example, the Maintenance Committee, Finance Committee, Reserve Planning Committee, and so on. An ad hoc committee is formed for a specific purpose and goes out of existence when that purpose is finished. Here an example might be a committee to redesign the front entrance to the association. It's important that committees clearly understand what is expected of them and that a board member is assigned to work with each committee to make sure they stay on track. It's through committees that you can identify and recruit future board members, and where they can gain valuable experience in association operations.
One of the most important responsibilities of the Board of Directors is communication, both from the owners and to the owners. Because it takes some time to do it right, it's often neglected by already busy boards.
Owners often get frustrated when they think the board's ignoring them, or when problems are unresolved, they don't know why. Often this is a result of their just not knowing what to do when a question or problem comes up.
You need to constantly remind owners how and when they can communicate with the board.
Now, you may have noticed on our agenda that there was no section for owners to talk to the board. That's because it covered only the business portion of a board meeting. We normally would give the owners a chance to raise issues and problems just prior to the meeting itself. However, once the business portion of the meeting starts, we don't allow discussion from the owners attending. We're there to conduct business.
Many states have sunshine laws requiring that meetings of the board be open to the owners. Whether it's required or not, it's always a good idea to allow owners to see the board in action. There are some exceptions to this, but check with your attorney to see when it might be appropriate or allowed to close a meeting.
Now, it's my job as president to see that the owners have an opportunity to talk with us. It's also my job to see that this communication is positive and productive. You can't allow personal attacks or abuse to occur. Presidents, keep control of the meetings.
Make sure the owners are kept fully aware of what is being considered by the board and what has been decided. Use letters, newsletters, even the internet. You'd be surprised how many of your owners are currently cruising the web. Consider putting relevant information on your own homepage. It's one more method of communicating.
If you find that owners are disturbing you at home, interrupting your dinners and family life, that's probably because they don't know what else to do. Make sure the board sets aside some time when they're available to owners, and that the owners know when that is.
If something potentially controversial is coming up, get the information out to the owners early and give them an opportunity to comment before a decision. Find out where the objections and problems are. No surprises, makes for better meetings and owner relations. We'd like to give you just a few more tips to help you out while you're on the board.
Try to keep things upbeat. If your board members are constantly complaining about the workload, the owners, or other problems, you'll find it hard to recruit new board members. Nobody wants to volunteer for a job that will just aggravate them for a year.
Make sure to thank and acknowledge other board members. Put their photos up in the clubhouse or in the newsletter. Give board members a plaque when their term is over. If your documents allow it and the owners approve, take the boards and their spouses out to dinner on the association as a thank you for donating their time and talent to the association.
I agree. Don't forget the board members' families. I always make it a point to thank them publicly at the annual meeting.
We couldn't possibly cover everything a board member needs to know in this short tape. Talk to the board members of other associations near yours. Often you'll find they have already faced a problem that you're working on and may have a good solution handy. Also, there are many local and national organizations that have publications and seminars available to help you.